Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Okay, everybody. So this morning, again, we're going to take a look at the Anattalakkhana Sutta, the discourse on the characteristic of not self. So anatta is we say conjunction of an and atta. Atta means self, and it was a kind of, at the time of the Buddha, it was a word that was thrown around in the context of a soul or a pervasive, stable essence. But in terms of our own practice, we kind of get some hints in that you can't find it anywhere. No matter where you look, whether you look in the body or you look in memories or you look in habits or you look in consciousness, you can't find any substantial core that's just always there and always consistent. So we know that the idea of atta is an idea, and it's an idea which, rather than having a core, we hold on to it and we latch onto it based on karma, basically, based on activity. We see the body move, we experience the body through the senses, therefore we assume the atta is in the body. We experience feelings, and we experience not the same feeling, but we experience the same kind of feeling over and over in regards to a certain thing. So we begin to intuit that is myself. Myself feels that way about that thing. So atta, rather than being this discrete, concrete core, we know that the whole idea is formed out of associations with other things. And the an before atta is the Buddha coming in and saying, what we're really concerned with is the non-self of things. And the word lakkhana means characteristic. So while we can't look anywhere in the universe to find the atta lakkhana, we can't find the self characteristic of things. We can look throughout the universe and throughout our mind to see the anatta lakkhana, to see the not self characteristic, because everything that we analyze would bear this characteristic of not self. This is not persistent. This is not stable. This is not I, me, and mine. So this sutta, canonically, doctrinally, is the second major sutta that the Buddha teaches. It's not numbered that way. You find it, as you can see, in the Samyutta Nikaya, in the 22nd chapter of the Samyutta Nikaya, sutta number 59. But while it's just like slipped in there, this is a major sutta, not just because it's one of the earliest that the Buddha gives, but because it's also, it lays out so many of the important frameworks that characterize the Buddha's teaching over the next 45 years. Yeah, and you say this is a cardinal sutta in the Theravada tradition. Now, who calls it a cardinal sutta? I woke up this morning and I had that question, and I kind of poked around, and because ever since I've been a monk, this is what we've called it. But I never really like, well, what's the Pali word for cardinal sutta? Like, who decided it was a cardinal sutta? And as far as I can tell, Venerable Nyanamoli back in the 90s called it a cardinal sutta. And he wrote a little book calling it a cardinal sutta. And the idea had stuck in the mind of people who are really into the various translations by all the jnanas and Bhikkhu Bodhi and such. So I don't know if it predates that in terms of somebody like really set it aside and like, this is the major, because as you can see, it wasn't at the time they were putting together the canon, they didn't like put it as the number 2 sutta in any of the collections. It's way off there in its own place. But in the present day, because we have access to all of these different teachings, if you are to be recommended a sutta that you should really take a look at, this is an obvious one, yeah, because you will learn so much of the important structures, and that's what we're gonna look at today. So the Anattalakkhana Sutta will break down into 4 sections, and we'll take a look at the first 2 this morning and the second 2 this afternoon. And it's not part of the sutta, but if it makes sense, these 4 sections kind of easily break down into the 4 noble truths. The first section describes suffering. The second describes the source of that suffering. The third coincides with the 4th noble truth, and it describes the way to the end of that suffering. And the sutta wraps up with the 3rd noble truth, which is the end of suffering, describing what that's like, and kind of as an exclamation point, it's the end of all suffering for the 5 monks who are there to receive this sutta. So we start out the sutta. Thus have I heard, at one time the Buddha was staying near Varanasi in the deer park at Isipatana. And so he addresses the group of 5 monks. These 5 monks, as we talked about last week, were there to receive the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, and Anyakondanya understood. He attained stream entry, and very shortly thereafter, one by one, each of the other of the 5 monks attained stream entry. When their minds were ripe, when they were settled and they understood and they were full of faith, the Buddha gives this discourse, and they all, with the weight of all the practice they had done, all of the asceticism they had done, and their attainment of stream entry in the middle way, they're able to break through and attain enlightenment. So these are those 5 mendicants. And the Buddha says, monks, and the monks say, Venerable Sir. And the Buddha says this: monks, form is not self, for if form were self, it wouldn't lead to affliction. And you could compel form, may my form be like this, may it not be like that. But because form is not self, it leads to affliction, and you can't compel form, may my form be like this, may my form not be like that. So this is the first section, the one that talks about a discernible characteristic and experience of suffering that we have in our life, whether or not we realize it. It forms a bracket with the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perceptions or memories, sankharas or mental formations, and consciousness. So the Buddha goes on to use this same: feeling is not self. For if feeling were self, it wouldn't lead to affliction. And on with perception, and on with sankharas, and then on with consciousness. Consciousness is not self. For if consciousness were self, it would not lead to affliction, and you could compel your consciousness. May my consciousness be like this, may it not be like that. But because consciousness is not self, it leads to affliction, and you can't compel consciousness. May my consciousness be like this, may my consciousness not be like that. Okay, so here we are. And honestly, this structure has thrown me off a bunch of times. It's not the most coherent in the English language. And it's just because it's counterintuitive. It's not how we normally think. And it might make a bit more sense if you reverse the order and you say, if I could say to my form, may my form be like this, may my form not be like that, it would not lead to affliction. And if we turn it around, then that makes a certain amount of sense, right? Like if you could decide what your form, and form is not just the body. Obviously, the body is the form that you suffer about the most, but your stuff, your pens and your watches and your cars and your refrigerators, your houses and your gardens and all of these things. These are forms that we identify with and we possess and we obsess over. Yeah. If you could say, may they be like this, may they not be like that, then you would never choose, may they afflict me, may they change, may they degrade, may they be destroyed. You'd never choose that. You'd say, may you stay the same. May you continue to please me. May you never ever change. May you forever bring me happiness. This is what you would choose if you had the power over them. But the Buddha is pointing out, we don't have that power. And the sensual world is just screaming that at us. This is not yours. This is, it's bound by the laws of physics. It is matter and energy, and it follows conditions as to what occurs to it. We obsess about it. We try to possess it. We assume it is us, but it has no such delusions. This is our first hint, and the first hint that the Buddha is giving to these five ascetics who are his audience. He's presenting Dhamma. He's presenting a truth, a basic foundational truth that they can use, that they can stand on, that they can root themselves in. This is not true just because the Buddha says it. This is something that once it's pointed out to you, you can see yourself, and you can take that knowledge, that insight with you wherever you go. Yeah, and this is also how we can practice with this. It's a kind of a strange idea, but what I'd suggest today, if you want to actually meditate on anatta, a really interesting meditation is to just take this standpoint, turn it around again, and say, if something causes you suffering, it is not self. If it causes you suffering, then it's out of your control and it is not self. And you may find that that's it's really curious and shocking kind of meditation subject, yeah. Because you'll find something like just like your a view that you have, and you'll be like, oh, I'm just like, this is really important to me, and you'll be like, well, does it cause me to suffer? It's like, yeah, I get in arguments about it all the time. And it's like, well, if it's causing me to suffer, then it can't be me, it can't be mine, it can't be myself, because I would if I was really in control of this, it was really the core of my being, I would never have something that was making me miserable as the core of my being. And so use this as a way to kind of like peel yourself off of something that you assume is like central to your existence. This is I, me, mine. You're like, well, no, this is causing me suffering. Therefore, it must be exterior to me. It must be a conditioned phenomena in the world outside of my control. And on with the other of the five aggregates. Yeah, feelings. It should be pretty obvious. Like, I mean, when we see something we really like, oh, I really like this particular herbal tea, and we could be like, oh, it just is so calming, it's so fragrant, oh, it's so nice, and it's like, so this is our feeling towards it, that this is a pleasant thing. And it's not always so easy to see how that can be a source of suffering. Yeah, but then we go outside, and we get a whiff of, it's trash day, and there's this smell kind of floating in of rotting garbage, and like, oh, that's terrible, and we don't want to feel bad, we don't want to feel unpleasant feeling, but we don't really have a choice. That's arising conditioned by the perception, the thing that we just experienced and cognized. Yeah. And so when we start to look at our feelings, we see we're not in control of them. They're arising based on conditions. If we were in control of them, we would keep hitting the pleasure button, right? Like, yep, herbal tea, pleasure. Stinky garbage, pleasure. Sunny day, pleasure. Rainy day, pleasure. Snowy day, pleasure. We would just keep hitting that button, but we're not in control. We don't get to choose. This is a conditioned phenomenon external to ourselves. Therefore, we experience whatever feeling has been conditioned to arise at that moment. Our memories, the sanyas, our perceptions of the world, our perspectives on the world, the sort of shimmery mirage-like mental images that tell us what something is based on what we've experienced and what we imagine and what we expect, all kind of jumbled together to form a mental idea. Well, these are also out of our control. And we like to think that our memories are some sort of stable thing, some persistent thing, like, well, okay, this thing happened to me in the past, and it's always that way. But just, examine a phenomena like different people at the site of a car accident having different perceptions of what happened. And you realize they all saw the same thing, but because they were standing in different places and taking in slightly different information, they formed a completely different mental picture of what it was. And it's not really possible for them to not rely on that to say what happened. When they all give a statement, they give a statement based on what they experienced, what they remember, what they saw. And you're not really getting fact, you're getting perspective. And your only hope of understanding what happened is to get enough perspectives that you can figure out what actually happened. Yeah? Sankharas, we get to experience this all the time. Yeah, we have habits and they keep happening all of the time. Sometimes we don't want them to. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we have a really good habit. We wake up in the morning and we reflect on the generosity of everybody who's helped us, and our teachers, and we look at the we look at the Buddha statue, and that's great. Those are good habits to start the day that way. Or we reflect on the five reflections. Yeah, I have the nature to age. I'm the nature to sicken. I'm the nature to die. All that is mine, beloved, and pleasing will pass away. All beings are the owners of their karma. We reflect on that every morning. It's a good habit. But we also have bad habits. And I don't need to point any of these out. We all got them. So you just look at them, though, that maybe they are not ours. And maybe that's why we can't just turn them on and off. It's because they're conditioned phenomena. They will continue to arise and have influence over the stream of thought as long as those conditions are present. And that when those conditions cease, the habit will also cease. The mental pattern will cease, regardless of our decisions. Yeah? And on with consciousness, which, we can get already winks on and off every moment. It's not a persistent, stable thing. We're having eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, mental consciousness arising, one after the other, never overlapping. Yeah. So obviously it's totally out of control. Yeah. I could say we just stand back and observe it, but often the thing that's doing the observing is often consciousness. We're conscious of our consciousness, and we have no choice over that either until until we attain samadhi, and consciousness can cease, and mindfulness can be able to see the arising and ceasing of consciousness and discern it. Before that, it's just it seems so pervasive. This is our first section. Yeah. This is not something we have to make true. It is just something we have to come to understand. And this is again, it matches the first noble truth. It's just there in front of us, this reality. Do we perceive it? And so we can look at our things and am I identifying with it? Do I think I have control over it? Or do I recognize this, hey, this is a thing. I don't have control over it. It's making me suffer. It's not mine. It's its own thing. Now we go into the second bracket, the second section, and this is with a dialogue. And so the Buddha, he says to the monks, what do you think, monks? Is form permanent or impermanent? And the monks say permanent. Or if they say impermanent, they don't say permanent, they say impermanent. But if it's impermanent, is it suffering or happiness? And they say, well, what's impermanent is suffering. And the Buddha says, but if it's impermanent, suffering, and perishable, is it fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, I am this is myself. And they say, no, no, Heitan Bante, no, no, Venerable Sir. He goes on with feeling, perception, sankharas, and consciousness. Is consciousness permanent or impermanent? I say it's impermanent, Venerable Sir. But if it's impermanent, is it suffering or happiness? I say it's suffering, Venerable Sir. But if it's impermanent, suffering, and perishable, is it fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, I am this is myself. And they say, no, Venerable Sir. So this is discernibly, this is a lot like the second noble truth, yeah? This is a characteristic in the world, and when we examine it, this turns out to be the source of that suffering that we experienced earlier. It's not just that we don't have control over something, because there's many things in the world that we have no control over, like our loved ones or our pets or the weather or well, yeah, anything. but things that we like, we don't have control over the taste of an orange, but it nevertheless brings us happiness. We don't have any control over how our pets act, and yet we see them and they're fuzzy and they're happy and they're looking up at us with love and adoration and a complete lack of comprehension of what we are besides the person who feeds them, and they make us happy. It's just, oh, it's so cute. We have no control and it makes us happy, but until it doesn't. And so the Buddha is pointing out this is the source of how we feel suffering, even from things that we like, even from things that we don't have control over. And if it's something that we like our pet, do we experience happiness or sadness when that pet passes away? Do we experience happiness or sadness when that loved one moves away? Do we experience happiness or sadness when this thing that we used to like changes and we can no longer enjoy it? No, we experience sadness. Obviously, we experience sadness when something we like changes. And this is a simple reality that it's easy to overlook. This thing can make us happy until it doesn't. But it's not that the thing has changed in any way. It's that the nature of it changing is what makes us unhappy. But this also should alert us to potential danger. We can delight in something, but if we know that it's going to change, and when it changes is going to cause us suffering, then we can know, even when something is making us happy, that it is the cause of future suffering. And that this cause of suffering is not here right now. It's just waiting. It's a condition that's already been set when we took joy in that thing, that pleasure in that thing, knowing that it is impermanent. It is at some point going to change. So the Buddha is saying, well, if something is like this, it is impermanent. It is bound to change because nothing stays the same. And because of this, it will make us unhappy when it changes. It will become something else other than the thing that made us happy. If that is the case, it is viparinama dhamma, a transient dhamma, a transient thing. Is it fit to say, this is I, this is me, this is mine, this is my thing? Well, no. In fact, we should actually start to question, like, is it even the thing that we think it is? If its very nature is to become something different in the future, then how much is it the thing that we think it is right now? So this form, we say, oh, well, that's a blank. That is this thing. But then you hit it with a hammer and it becomes something totally different. It becomes a pile of those things. Well, how much was it the original thing? Well, it's the original thing to the degree that we could say that is a blank, but it was not permanently that. That wasn't its permanent essence. That was just as it is right now. And when it changes, this should not surprise us. If we've been paying attention and we've been carefully attending to the fact that us expecting it to stay the same will only cause us suffering. And we start to let it go. We start to get some distance from anything that will make us happy if it stays the same, but will make us miserable if it changes. And start to disconnect and say, well, maybe that's not fit to be attached to. Maybe that's not fit to be identified with. Maybe that's not fit to be possessed. Maybe I will start to change my relationship to that thing, that rather than me as possessor, it's me as steward. I'm the one who takes care of that thing. I'm the one who looks after that thing, but it is not by any means my thing under my control, my possession to be cherished. It is a thing I'm getting to use right now. And when I no longer get to use it, well, then it's something else. And if we develop that relationship, then we have taken away the potential suffering. Even if we were to apply that relationship to something like our feelings or our memories, yeah, we can be very proud of our good memory until it's not so good anymore. And we can't remember what we did last week, let alone 20 years ago. Although curiously, I met a lot of people who are really good at remembering things that happened 20 years ago, not so good at remembering what happened last week. There's a curious thing about about the mind. Yeah. But nevertheless, when we start to misplace these memories, when they don't come back so clearly, when we start to jumble things up, well, we can just say it's like, well, those were of the nature to change. Yeah, my ability to recall accurately, completely, quickly was of the nature to change. And having foreseen that, it's still a bit of a shock. It's still a bit of a sting, oh, I totally can't remember the words to this chant that I've done 1,000 times. I guess I'm getting up there. I was getting old. It's like this was bound to happen sooner or later. If we know how to deal with it, yeah, it's a little embarrassing, but we can kind of just look at the people around us and just kind of shrug and be like, yeah, it's blank. There's nothing up there. I can't remember. And the potential source of suffering is no longer a source of suffering because we didn't identify with it, we didn't grasp, we didn't try to hold on to it. Okay, so this is where we'll pause for the morning, and we'll pick it back up in the afternoon and look at the final 2 sections of this sutta. This is enough to work with, yeah, to take with us as we sit, as we meditate, as things come up. Again, if something causes us suffering, we immediately just grab it and say, it's like, oh, you can't possibly be me or mine or my thing because you're making me suffer. I don't permit the things that are me to cause me suffering. To look at how things are changing, and that because they're changing, we already let them go before they do. Just let them go their own way. And what does that start to leave us with as we do it? Well, we realize again, it's pretty easy once we get the hang of it to see this Anattalakkhana, this not self-characteristic in things. It's like, oh, that's out of my control. Oh, that's always changing. Oh, that's a source of suffering. Yeah. And fewer and fewer things do we just assume have that Anattalakkhana, that characteristic of self attached to them. So, yeah, okay. At this point, I'll I'll stop the recording. If anybody has any questions or comments on the first section, now's your chance. Yeah.